So people are always asking me, hey Brian, how many times do things get thrown at you on FrenchPressCoffee.com? And the answer is sometimes quite a lot. So what's this? It's the Lido OG manual coffee grinder, and we're going to talk about it today on FrenchPressCoffee.com. So if you are looking for a manual coffee grinder that has macro and micro adjustments to the grind size, the fineness, the coarseness, this is going to be the one for you. I've not actually seen a hand grinder like this before. We have spoken about other Lido grinders here on the channel, but this one is the first of its kind, not only for Lido, but also just really in general. So that's something that I think is going to interest a lot of folks who like to grind by hand. I like that it's called the OG, because to me that means the original gangster, but you know, I'm sure that's not necessarily what we're talking about here. Either way, this is the OG. Let's unbox right here. Okay, we've got a really nice carrying case. The logo right on there, and a handle, which is also super cool. So first impressions, just right out of the box and put together, it feels awesome. It's got great weight to it, which is something that I spoke about in Lido hand grinders in the past, is that I really like the weight to them. It just makes it a lot easier to grind, I find. So that's one first impression. The other is that I love this part of the body of the device because it's rubberized. And that means you're going to get a nice grip and you're not going to slide all over the place. You know, the rubber combined with the weight is really awesome. Starting at the top, we have our handle and the small knob that is on the edge of it, and this is also rubberized, so it feels great. Again, you're not going to slip around or anything like that. Then on the top, you have this cap, which is going to keep everything put together. If you loosen this up, then your handle will come off. Moving down, we have the brass micro adjustment ring, and this is where you're going to make your very fine adjustments to the primary grind setting that you're going to use. This is vertical burr movement, so it has to do with how the burrs are going to move inside of the unit. And we'll talk about all of that a little later here. But there is also, to note here, a small vertical line that is on that brass adjustment disc, and that's what you're going to pay attention to when you're making adjustments. And then attached to the brass cap is this little sort of screw right here that you can adjust. And this is going to be used for actually making the adjustments with the brass cap. You want to have it set in pretty tight, not too tight, but tight enough that it's going to seat right up against the brass cap there. And we'll talk about how that's used for the adjustments later on as well. Then moving down, you have your primary adjustment ring or cap right here, and this has measurements in microns starting over here at your 0 point and then moving all the way up 200, 400, 600, etc. until we get to the 2000 mark. And this has this nice big hash mark, this vertical white line right here, which is going to allow you to be able to pretty quickly and easily eyeball how it is that you are setting your grind setting. Then moving down, you can see I had that cap off right here. We've got this rubber cap, and that's how you're going to add beans to the unit. You can see the shaft right down in there. And then we have kind of just the rest of the body. This part doesn't turn or anything along those lines. What does come apart is the aluminum catch container right here for all of your grounds. And then looking on the inside, this is where you have your anodized steel burrs. And these, of course, are going to adjust in their gap depending on the setting that you make on the actual grind settings on the top of the unit. So that's pretty much it. It's actually pretty simple when you break it right down with respect to its overall parts. Now, the operation of it might take a little bit of getting used to, but we'll talk about that next. Let's go ahead and measure the height of the unit overall. So we're at just about 12 inches when we get to right at the top of the handle and the knob that is on it. And then we're looking at just about 3 inches in diameter overall. So it's not a very large unit, but it is bigger than a lot of other hand grinders that we may have spoken about here in the past. That's a little bit different from some other hand grinders we've spoken about. Oftentimes they have ceramic burrs, but this one does have the hardened steel burrs. And then moving on to adjusting the unit for grinding, this is something that might take you a little bit of getting used to, but once you do and you really kind of figure out what you want, I think it's going to make it a lot easier and give you a really specific grind. As I was mentioning a little bit earlier, on the top of the unit we have our measurements in order to set the grind size, the fineness or the coarseness, and that allows us to go from starting at the 0 point, where we're going to be doing Turkish grind, moving up to espresso, really fine, and then going all the way up to French press or cold brew or something that's going to be much more coarse up here on the 2000 range. So again, we've got a range of 0 to 2000 on the top of the unit. Just above that main macro adjustment disc, we have the micro adjustment disc. This allows you to adjust the vertical cone burr movement, and you can do this in fifths. So starting at 0, we would then go 5, 10, 15, 20 up from there. If we were going towards the C side, which would be more coarse, and if we were going towards the more fine side marked by F, then that would allow us to again go backwards, 5, 10, 15, 20, etc., which then allows us to get more fine about our grind by first making our macro adjustment setting and then doing our micro adjustment setting. So the Lido OG is definitely going to be awesome for folks who love espresso. If you really, really love espresso, and specifically you want to be very accurate about how you're going to grind your espresso, this is going to be an excellent grinder. It's also going to be very fitting, of course, for those who are going to be brewing French press, cold brew, and etc. But I think that one of the big things about a hand grinder that is great is because you are only going to grind so much, it means that you can focus very closely on the type of grind, and that's important in espresso. You know, you wouldn't necessarily use a hand grinder like this to do a big pot of coffee in an automatic drip machine or something like that. You certainly could, but it's going to be a little more work because of how much coffee you're going to have to grind. But with those really nice fine adjustments, if you love espresso or Turkish, something super, super fine, this will allow you to do that very easily. So let's do a little bit of grinding. I don't have any beans though. Does anybody have any beans? Thank you. Thanks, Eager. He's always got my back. What do I have? I have some Red Rock Roasters Select Reserve right here. Love Red Rock Roasters. This specific Select Reserve that I have right here is farm direct, and the farm is owned by women, and it's got a honey process. This is some good stuff right here. So you can check them out at redrockroasters.com or, of course, on frenchpresscoffee.com. So let's go ahead and open this guy up. And so now we're just going to put in a little bit of beans into the device. Now we are going to have another video where we get very, very in depth about grinding with the Lido OG, but for now, let's just go ahead, put a little bit in there because I know everyone wants to see how the thing grinds. Now we're just going to grind for espresso, and so I'm going to just quickly, using my stepped adjustment ring right here, I'm going to turn this to the right, and you can hear those clicks. It's stepped, so that way it makes it really, really easy to make the selection. I'm just going to keep an eye on my white line right here, that little hash mark. That lets me know that I'm at 0 right now, and then I'm just going to click, click, click. That's 3 clicks over there to the right. Now I'm going to be sitting at 350, and that should be a pretty decent setting for grinding for espresso. I'm going to note one thing real quickly before I grind here. Just be careful to make sure that you keep this cap on with your hand. It could be a little easy to just kind of push it off if you're not careful, so I've noticed that it's best if I just keep my hand over it. But again, the great thing is because this is rubberized, it's going to make it really easy to keep it in place. So now that I've adjusted using my stepped disc, I'm just going to go ahead and grind. And again, the thing I like here is that this is obviously going to be very fine, so it's going to take a lot more work, and it feels a lot less stressful because it's, you know, a really sturdy device, and that rubberized part of the body and also this handle really makes it a lot easier. Okay, so let's see what we got. I didn't grind for too long, but let's just see what we got out of that. Wow, yeah. I mean, that is pretty fine. That's impressive. I do want to mention that's really consistent. I mean, this is like, it's perfect fine powder. That's really, really awesome. So now with that said and done, let's go ahead and jump all the way up to 1200, which is going to be good for French press. So again, using the stepped disc, we're just going to turn until we hit the number 1200 right there. We're not making any micro adjustments. Again, we'll talk about that in another video because that's going to be a little more in depth. But making this macro adjustment, now we're going to go for French press. This is going to be a much more coarse grind, so it should be a little easier to do. Definitely less resistance, for sure. You know, it's a little easier to turn, but I can still really feel that it's doing the work in there for sure. Okay, and let's see what we've got now. Yeah, that's also really, really, really consistent. Not breaking up or any large chunks or anything like that. Just a really good, consistent grind. Now, I will mention that for a setting of 1200, which we would usually use for French press, that is maybe a little too fine. I would want this probably a little more coarse in order to get it great for French press. So it's probably worth mentioning here that there's a few things that you could do. You know, first of all, you could use your micro adjustment ring on the top to further adjust that, but that's only going to do so in very small vertical burr movement settings. So the most important thing to mention here is that this is a new Lido OG hand grinder, and so as a result, the burrs are still going to need a little bit of breaking in. So as you season them, you'll start to find that your grind will start to even out a little bit more. Not that it's not even in how it's grinding, but just in the overall size. So what we would suggest in that case with a new device would be to go ahead and use that stepped ring to go up to 1600. Usually that would be probably a little more than we would want for French press, but if you're going for French press, go to 1600, do some test grinds, then you'll probably be able to step down after a little bit of time to 1400, and then eventually get yourself back to the 1200 mark, and that should be about spot on. But again, this all has to do with the way that you're going to brew and how you prefer your coffee to be. Of course, we talk about French press coffee a lot here on FrenchPressCoffee.com. It's in our name. So we're going to focus pretty heavily on that, but your mileage may vary when you're using the Lido OG manual grinder. So what's our bottom line with the Orphan Espresso Lido OG manual hand grinder? Really, it's an awesome unit. I mean, I have to say, it's super easy to use and it feels really smooth. I love just the overall weight, the feel of it. The fact that you've got all these rubberized parts is super awesome because I do have hand grinders that don't have that, and it's really hard sometimes to grind, especially when you're doing those much more fine grinds like espresso and etc. I think that for those who do love espresso and also really want to be able to be very specific about their grind and adjust in not only the micro but the macro adjustments and be able to do it really easily, I think this is totally the grinder for you, especially if you like to do it by hand. And again, doing it by hand is going to allow you to be really specific, but this is really the first of its kind with this grinder allowing you to do those micro adjustments, which remember we will be talking about in another video with the Orphan Espresso Lido OG. I think the only maybe things that are a bit of a downside is this cap right here where you open up to add your beans. It is really easy to knock it off. You know, as I say, if I just kind of go like that, it really does come off very easily. So you just need to remember that it's there and not knock it off. It's not too much of a big deal overall. And I think another thing that's maybe just a little bit of a downside on the device is this adjustment knob right here, which allows you to, by loosening it, to make adjustments to the micro adjustment on the brass cap on the top of the device. And the only reason for that is that this could be very easy to break. You know, if you happen to toss this, which hopefully you wouldn't do, into a drawer or something like that, or even maybe if you're traveling with it, you could kind of hit this and maybe break it because it is really just a small screw that goes into the brass micro adjustment cap. So you just need to be careful of that and keep it in mind. But beyond that, it really feels like a super durable device. Again, the weight is really, really excellent. And obviously, as you can see, it offers a really excellent grind. So I think that if you are the type of person who just wants to get super in depth with your grind and do it by hand, the Orphan Espresso Lido OG is going to be an awesome way to go. So there you have it, everyone. That is the Orphan Espresso Lido OG manual hand grinder. Hope that you found this useful. Now we are going to have other videos that are going to go even more in depth into the usage of the device, so make sure you check those out. And as always, if you have questions, comments, if we missed something or anything else, get in touch with us in the comments section of this video, or even better, visit us at FrenchPressCoffee.com, where we do have the Orphan Espresso Lido OG manual hand grinder and lots and lots and lots and lots of other goodies for you and your at-home coffee shop. Again, everyone, I'm Brian with FrenchPressCoffee.com. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Take care.
So did you like that video? If so, go ahead and give us a like, maybe subscribe to our channel, and if you do, I'll give you a great coffee quote. Come on, subscribe. All right, awesome, thank you so much. And now for the coffee quote. Remember that coffee is like a hug in a mug.